evening, and we want to thank you for being here. I'm Bill Pike. I'm Director of Operations here at Trinity United Methodist. It's an honor to have you with us for our 5th community conversation. This evening, we have some special guests from Henrico County that we'll be learning from. John Vitokas, County Manager, and Eric English, Chief of Police. For the audience, whether you're here in the sanctuary or at home watching, this will be a conversation with John and Eric, and for the last 15 minutes of the conversation, we will open it up for questions from the audience. If you're watching at home, you'll be able to submit a question via the chat box. That's a part of the broadcast. And if you're here in the sanctuary, there's a microphone set up halfway up the middle aisle there that you can go and ask a question to. So, John and Eric, it's a real honor to have you, and we thank you for joining us this evening. So let's get started. And by the way, I just want you to know that those questions I sent over for you to review, I've thrown those away, okay? You know, we're just going to go blind in this. No, I'm just kidding you. I just want to see if you're breathing over there. So, yeah, what questions? So, John, let's start with you. And you're going to need that microphone. Yeah, and it's already on, okay? And just remember, good placement.
Yes,
so
sir.
We can hear you. Okay. John, tell us a bit about yourself, where you grew up, your education, and how you found your way to Henrico County.
So my mom and dad, I was born in Athens, Greece, in 1967. My dad was in textiles, and at the time the governmental structure in Greece was not conducive to raising a family. And so my mom and dad decided to come to the U.S. for work. And I was 11 months old when we immigrated. We lived in New York City, and there at a time when textiles actually existed in New York City. Ultimately moved to the Midwest, Cleveland, and ultimately textiles went south to other countries, if you will.
Right.
And so my family came here when I was in the 6th grade, and I went to Three Chopt Elementary School as a 6th grader because 6 back then was elementary.
Right, yes.
And then Tuckahoe Middle, Tucker High School. I went to VCU, then graduate school in Charlotte, UNC Charlotte, and ultimately ended up back here, married my high school sweetheart, and actually have the dream job because I find myself managing the locality I grew up in, care so much about. My parents are here. I've got 2 brothers, a lot of family, and so that's my story.
Yeah, and that's a good one. Eric, how about you? Tell us how you found your way to Richmond and your education and all those good things.
So I actually grew up I was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in 1967 as well.
Wow.
And grew up in a small city called Eflin, North Carolina.
Oh,
It's
yes.
near Durham, Chapel Hill area.
Yep.
Went to high school in Hillsborough. Was athletics, played a lot of sports growing up, and was fortunate enough to be good enough to get a college scholarship to University of Richmond to play basketball. And I attended that university in 1985 through 89. Played basketball there for 4 years. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Upon graduating college, ended up joining the Richmond Police Department. Did that for 29 years. Retired from there. Did 2 years in Harrisonburg as a police chief there, and was fortunate enough to matriculate myself here to Henrico County. And I was fortunate enough to, like John, and I was able to marry my high school sweetheart, who's in the audience as well.
Right.
So just a wonderful kind of circle to come back here to Henrico County and be a part of this organization.
Well, I'm an old North Carolina boy myself. I grew up in Burlington, so I know where Eflin is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I remember, when I first moved to Virginia, people would ask me the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and the road to Richmond.
Yep.
Did anybody ever say that to you?
They sure did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, did you and John ever have any battles about VCU and University of Richmond basketball?
No, we never really talked about that. I actually got my master's degree from VCU, which is kind of odd since I got
Right.
my undergrad from U of R. But no, don't really have any battles about that. Some other folks, yes, we do talk about that.
Yeah. Well, they're both terrific universities and quality programs in terms of athletics. So those are both great stories there to get us started. You're both very busy. You have schedules that I assume you get interrupted even when you're off. So one question is just curiosity, when do you sleep?
Go ahead.
Well, I will tell you this. One of the things I did learn, in my years of policing is when I left Richmond, one of the things I always told myself is I was going to find some balance in my life. And that's what I try to do. Richmond, I always tell people it's like policing on steroids when I was there. And I was having the opportunity to go to Harrisonburg, which is much calmer,
Right.
Much different environment. And then get here in Henrico, I just try to figure out ways in order for myself to ensure that I do get the proper rest, the proper time off so I can rejuvenate myself.
Right.
So I do find ways to do that.
Yeah, that's good. John, how about you?
I mean, I think there's balance in everything. So early on, I felt like as a young county manager, I had some difficulty with just, there's so much, if you allow so much to enter into all of your thoughts and actions. And the reality is with age and maybe a few miles and a few years, your perspective, I mean, when you've got someone like Eric English and you've got, I see Mark Coakley here, our registrar. I mean, some of the folks that we have that work at the county and the school system,
Right.
simply remarkable.
Yeah,
So I've learned to sleep
Yeah.
much better over the years.
well, that's good. We want to keep you both up and running. So, John, it was interesting hearing you tell your story about coming to America. And I'm just wondering, when you were growing up, did you ever see yourself in the role that you're in now?
So initially, when I went to VCU, my career goal was to go into the law. I wanted to be a lawyer. I was going to go into the Marine Corps and go through that program and basically then go to law school. And I talked to a professor my final year, and I won't say what he told me in church about lawyers. And I hope nobody, I don't mean to offend anyone, but his point was there are a lot of lawyers in the world. Do something that matters. And so he sent me to go see someone named Bob, who was the city manager at the time, and I interviewed with him, and he basically hired me on the condition that I'm not going to get paid, and I'm going to work for a year, and then, at the end of that year, I will have learned something. So it totally changed my perspective as far as what's possible. Local government then became the focal point, and make a long story short, after that internship, I decided that I wanted to be in city or county management. And I was fortunate in that I also came to Henrico after working for several years in Chesterfield County, and met a gentleman named Virgil Hazlett, who took me under his wing and gave me some opportunities that, as a young man, I was privileged to have a number of mentors, but he really was the differentiator in my career.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I hope as an older man now that I'm helping a number of our younger employees do the same thing.
I would imagine that you are, and doing it in a quality way. Eric, how about you? When you were growing up, you ever see yourself in this role that you're in now?
So truly, it would depend on which phase of life you're referring to.
Okay.
Because growing up, I would have never said, I would say no, because I didn't even envision myself being a police officer. It was not something I intended to do, not something I was looking to do. But once I got to college, I majored in criminal justice.
So truly, it would
my
depend
thought
on
process
which phase of
changed a
life
little
you're
bit
referring to.
in terms of what I was looking at. And so once I was about to graduate, I had the same kind of vision. I was thinking about going to law school, or I was going to go to the FBI. Talked to an individual FBI agent. He said if I want to go to the FBI, I need to get some local law enforcement experience. And that's when I applied to Richmond. And once I got into the business of law enforcement, I knew there was something that I was going to stay and continue to do. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And once I got into that, I did envision myself being in a position such as this because, as county manager mentioned, I had some great mentors as well. And then one of my chiefs, Chief Rodney Monroe,
Yes.
was a huge influence in me continuing in the success I've had. Just from his words of wisdom and his guidance, I've done some pretty interesting things in my career based on some of the leadership that he expounded upon.
Yeah. The good stories, and good influences there. John, in the summer of 1979, my wife and I moved to Henrico County, and we both accepted teaching positions here. And I can remember that summer when we would cross Parham Road and head out West Broad, it would narrow down into basically 2 lanes. And it seemed within like a year or two, it just exploded out there. Can you maybe give us some insight? I'm taking you back, but what caused that explosion? Why did all of a sudden it just went boom out there?
So, I mean, people make choices as to where they live. And I remember that year, West End Manor would have been
Yes.
pretty much as far west.
Yep.
Innsbruck didn't exist, and then you went out into the hinterlands.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was nothing out there. The reality is that as we developed, and I think you got to go back to Bill Lavecchia.
Okay.
So Bill Lavecchia did an incredible thing for this county outside of his service. He was able to bring the interstate through Henrico, and that interstate brought 11 interchanges. And as it was developed, what ultimately ended up happening was economic development. Henrico's always been very fiscally sound, low tax rate. The schools have been phenomenal. And so literally companies started coming here. Individuals started deciding, you know, this is where I want to live. This is where I want to raise my family. And you fast forward a number of years, and I think, you know, there's an incredible legacy here.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, I think it's something that, you know, we're going to have to continue to fight to keep that spot as
Right.
far as being that bright spot in the region.
Yeah. You're right. There's still a lot of challenges out there, and I think people figure out ways to try to reinvent themselves and reuse places. And you know, it's amazing to me what's out there in the western part, but it's also amazing to me the development that's taken place in the eastern half of the county too. And there's, you know, a lot of potential, and it always amazes me how the county is looking for opportunities, and we seem to do a pretty good job of that. So we
I hope so.
Yeah.
It feels like, so last year in the past 18 months, during COVID, if you will, the development patterns have shifted eastward. Fairfield has had a lot of development, and when you add in, you know, what we're going to be looking at with Green City,
Right.
with Virginia Center Commons, River Mill, Woodman Road, I mean, it is, and that is a very good thing,
Right.
because ultimately, you know, Varina or portions of Varina, you know, quite frankly, have to develop in a quality way, just like the West End did.
Sure.
Because otherwise, you'll have development going here, there, and everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Chief English, with over 30 years in police work in 3 different jurisdictions, you've seen a lot of changes in policing. When you think about your work, is there a change that has taken place that you didn't anticipate in policing?
Wow, that is a great question. There's been a lot of different elements in law enforcement that have occurred over my period of time. I can tell you that I guess, you know, I would say a lot of the law changes that have evolved over the years. I think we anticipated quite a few of those.
Right.
Some of them not so much. You know, I don't know if people ever thought that, you know, when I first started my career, I'm just telling you, when I first started my career, the way we looked at things much differently from a legislative standpoint. I don't think people ever thought marijuana would become legal
Right.
when I first started.
No,
So when we talk about evolving,
Right.
a lot of those type of activities are a lot of the legislative changes that have taken place. And then I would just say the biggest thing is, you know, for me is, you know, when I first started my career, there was not a lot of meshing of community and policing.
Okay.
You know, we made decisions. We went with those decisions. Community was not involved in a lot of those decisions. And I've seen that evolve over the years where we recognize that we had to be a part of that community, and we all have to be
Right.
a part of the decision-making process in order to resolve issues.
Yep.
And so that has been something I don't think I saw early on in my career, but it's evolved, and we recognize that's the method that needs to take place.
Yeah, building those relationships is critical. I mean, you both know that, but it's becoming, I think, even more important now, and that kind of feeds into our next question. You both are constantly called upon to work with people, and in some instances, community members are not happy. Over the years, have either of you found ways that make it easier to work with people who are upset?
For me personally, the truth, always. I don't think people, and I think at this point, we were talking about it earlier, I don't think it has anything to do with public service. People right now with COVID, 2.5 years, I mean, there's a lot going on with folks, so I think we're dealing with that. But every now and again, I mean, within the public realm, I see Linda Robinson here. I mean, you have citizens that, let's say, are more engaged than others.
Right.
But any and every time we have a touch point with a citizen, the least common denominator, the worst service is what they'll remember.
Right.
And so if somehow we can not do that and have folks, have that positive feeling like, you know what, he listened to me.
Right.
Or, you know what, I talked to the chief of police.
Yeah.
I called complaining, and next thing I know, Chief English calls me.
Right.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think makes a difference.
Yeah, you're spot on, and I was going to say that. Main thing I've learned is that people just want you to listen. People just want to be heard. And again, I don't think either of us got into this business to make everybody happy.
Right.
Everybody's not going to agree with us. They're not going to agree with every decision we make, but we can at least listen and have an understanding of where people are coming from. And I think that's all people can ask for. I think people understand that we all have priorities in what we're trying to accomplish. And so as long as you explain that to individuals, they may not always agree, but at least you've listened and you've given an explanation of why certain things are prioritized and why you got to the point that you are now. So that's what I would take away from it.
Yeah, I think you both hit something critical there. The truth is so important. And then, giving the time to a person to be able to listen. They feel like they're heard. That is just really an essential piece of it. And I think you're right, you can't make everyone happy, but at least getting at the truth and listening is a big part of that. When you take a look at police data related to crime, Chief English, if you could fix one thing in our community that could potentially reduce crime, what would you do? What would you aim for?
So that is a very difficult question, because when you say one thing, because I just don't think there's one thing that you can do that's going to have the significant impact that is needed. I think it has to be a multitude of things. But, if you narrow me down to one, I think the socioeconomic piece of that has to take place. You got people living in conditions that are just conducive to crime.
Right.
And so if there's ever a way that we as a society can figure that piece out, I think it makes things a lot easier for individuals. And so that would be the biggest takeaway for me as far as crime reduction.
Yeah.
But there's just so many other entities that need to play a role in that in order for us to make some really, really significant inroads in reducing crime.
I think you're absolutely right that economic divide is a big part of that's woven into that too. And I always scratch my head. We can build all these telescopes and spend billions and billions of dollars and go out in space, and yet some of these core problems that we've struggled with for years, we're still struggling. So I think that's a really appropriate answer. John, how about for you? Is there something that
for me, the biggest success we could have would be with 52,000 kids in the school system.
Okay.
I mean, no local government is going to go in a bad way by doing the right things for the schools.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like from a facility standpoint, we've done that.
Yes.
And now comes the harder part. I mean, to Chief's point, we now have over 100 languages that are spoken in our schools, all sorts of socioeconomic differences among the students, and then parents that care, and quite frankly, parents that don't.
Yes.
And so I think anything that we can do, to pay it forward for that next generation with the resources that we have local that are available to us is money very, very well spent.
Right. Now, Chief English, I'm really going to put you on the spot because your wife's in the audience. And John, who knows, maybe your wife is watching at
She
home.
may be watching.
She
Oh,
may be
Lord.
watching home. So here's my question for you, gentlemen. How would your wives rate you as listeners? How would they say your listening skills are at home?
What'd he say?
Wow, you are putting me on the spot. My answer would probably be different than my wife's answer. But I would say probably a 5.
Oh,
She would
okay.
probably rate me because I hear it all the time, say, you don't listen to me. But you know, again, I think, you know, over the years, you know, we've been married for over 30 years now.
Right.
So, you know, I guess sometimes it gets to the point where we don't listen to each other.
Right.
But I think, you know, we have you know, like I said, we were high school sweethearts, and so I think we kind of got some common ground, and
Yeah.
we really respect each other's decision making
Right.
over that time.
Yeah. John, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. You know, at 54, my hearing has gotten a lot more acute.
Well, I'll give you both credit for this. You both told the truth, I think. So, and maybe they'll get you some brownie points at home, too. You know, working with the public requires a lot of different skills. But as you look to the future, how will we find good, competent, reliable people to fill positions in county government and the police department?
Wow, I will tell you, in all my time in public service, this is probably the most difficult time for law enforcement, and to find the right people to come into the business in order to make the proper change that's needed. But I can tell you there are a lot of folks out there that are willing to do that. One of the things we got to consistently do is you got to show individuals what you're all about. I think again it goes back to, you know, expressing the truth to individuals, being very transparent about what you do, and I think you'll get the right individuals within the organization. I always tell people we can teach you how to be a police officer, but you got to have the individuals that are coming to your organization that have the proper sense about them in terms of communicating with individuals in the community.
Right.
And sometimes that's hard to teach somebody to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But if I got somebody that's able to talk to individuals, able to communicate, I can teach them the other parts of being a police officer. And so I think there are folks out there like that. We just have to continue to try to push the envelope to make sure we are getting the proper individuals within law enforcement.
Right. John, how about
So
you?
for us in general government, you know, you've got 5 generations in the workforce now. The generation that's coming in, you know, they want to do meaningful work. And there's a lot of criticism that I've heard about, you know, well, this generation doesn't do this or doesn't do that. Our experience is that we're bringing in folks and we're giving them the ability to make decisions, but we're also allowing them to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do that as an organization and not get caught up or we'll have to worry about political repercussions,
Right.
we're going to have people on the general government side within agencies fail every day because we ask them to do certain things and empower them to do it.
Right.
I mean, our workforce is getting younger and younger. We just today hired a county attorney that's in his 30s. Our chief of staff just surpassed 30.
Right.
We have many agency heads. I mean, you and I, 1967, let me tell you, is on the older side of your Henrico department heads and deputy county managers and all of that.
Right.
And that's a good thing because ultimately we're, you know, if we create that welcoming place, then they're going to serve the citizens in a very good way.
Yeah.
If not, then we're just going to be another local government.
Right. Well, I think you both gave interesting responses to that, and you know, you just have to dig and find people. And I think the other piece of that is you know, you do learn from your failures. I mean, that's historically, you can see all kinds of things that we benefit from now that came out of failures.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so a little something different here for you. If tomorrow you were given the opportunity either to eat lunch with anyone in the world, who would you choose and why?
I mean, I'd choose my wife and kids. I thought of it, when I first, I did read that question, and can it be someone that has passed on?
Sure, I'm
So, as a kid that grew up in the late 60s and thinking about politics early on, it may end up being someone like JFK or Martin Luther King.
right.
And I just can't fathom, what folks like that encountered. I mean, think about it. And we talk about now, we've got these what issues compared to what they were dealing with.
Right. Yeah. Eric, how about you?
So, county manager's reading my mind because I was having difficulty just trying to come up with somebody that is currently here on this earth, and I was just wondering the same thing. Could it be somebody that's no longer here?
Yeah.
And I was thinking along the same lines.
Right.
I like listening to history and trying to delve into the minds of those that have gone on before us, those trailblazers,
Right.
and what they had to deal with. But even folks like my grandfather,
Sure.
who I never really had the opportunity to ever sit down and just kind of listen to his life story.
Right.
Those type of things are, I think, extremely important for me.
Right.
That's who I would
Yeah.
sit down and have
Yeah.
lunch with.
Okay. Eric, when you played basketball at the University of Richmond, when your team made it to the NCAA Sweet 16 in 1988, what was your most significant takeaway from that experience?
Well, the most significant takeaway is if you're confident in your ability, you can accomplish a lot. And what I mean by that is I never forget me and two of my teammates, before we left to go, we had to play in Hartford, Connecticut. And before we left to go, we went to a barbershop in downtown Richmond.
Yeah.
The barbers in there were like, who y'all got to play? We said we got to play Indiana in the first round. Well, Indiana was the national champions the year before.
Right.
And so everybody in the barbershop was like, whoa, y'all will be home quick. And so we're all in there like, man, we can't play.
Yeah.
And so we were very confident in our ability. And so getting past the first round, beating Indiana, we had to play Georgia Tech in the second round.
Right.
And we had already beaten Georgia Tech in the regular season.
Yeah.
We beat them at their place.
Yeah.
And so we knew what they were all about. And so we were a very confident group of individuals. And even though our name may not be an Indiana or a Georgia Tech,
Right.
if you're confident in your abilities, you can accomplish a lot.
Right. And look what's happened with those opportunities and being confident. I mean, you put the Richmond Spiders on the map, and that continued in a lot of different ways. So, good story. Since you both are fathers, what's the best piece of advice that you've received from one of your children? John, how about you start?
For me, the kids' patience, slow down, Dad. I remember being a totally different person before I had kids and after. But there's a picture of my daughter. I've got two boys and a girl, and there is something about dads and girls, as many of you may know. So I've got this picture of my daughter that I take into tough meetings. Every board meeting, it's the same picture, and it's just a reminder. But if anything, they've made me a much better person.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I love that piece about patience. That's one for all of us to work on. Eric, how about you?
Wow, I don't know. My wife would probably say they probably hadn't told me anything that's probably significant. I could tell you I worked a lot, early on in my career. I started my career in 1989.
Yeah.
Policing was not a very lucrative
Right.
Occupation.
Right.
And for many of us, it's still not a very lucrative occupation.
Right.
But I worked a lot in my early years, and I think one of the things my kids would probably tell me is that they always say, "Well, Dad, you get ready to leave again.
Yeah.
You got to go out again."
Right.
So it's those type of things where you start to continuously hear that,
Right.
and they recognize that they want you to be a part of
Sure.
their lives, and
Yeah.
so I had to recognize that some things I needed to put aside and kind of slow
Right.
down as well.
Yeah. I think that happens to everybody that's in public service. You have to figure that balance out. And it's nice they gave you some gentle reminders about that. John, recently the county replaced 2 high schools, and those schools have storied histories with brand new state-of-the-art facilities. What was a key factor in making this a reality?
The vote that our residents took in 2013 approving a meals tax for schools. Could not have been done without it. These are $200 million facilities, and we had to have, it was more than meals tax that made it happen, but ultimately that kind of support and that kind of flexibility, and then having 10-0, right? 10-0, 5 on the school board and 5 on the board of supervisors, and not having this bickering that you see in some other localities about let's do it this way or let's do it this way, or, you know, just some of the stuff that I've seen over the years. The proudest I think I've seen our board of supervisors for sure be was those 2, and I know I think it's the same for the school board, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Those were 2 really unique special projects, and you really, you know, when you talk about collaboration and working together, you really help meld that and make that happen together. And so that's 2 terrific projects that will benefit from a long period of time. We've talked about this a little bit already, but during the last 2 years, the pandemic's really punched us. How have you and your staffs kept daily operations going? What's been the key to being able to do that in these difficult times?
Well, you do have to make some modifications. You know, it's hit us just like it has any other industry in terms of staffing. And so you have to make sure your employees stay abreast of what's going on. You take the precautionary measures that have been, as guidelines that have been recommended. And you also, there's been some times we had to actually cut back services, try to diminish our contact with individuals. And so one of the things you want to make sure that the public understands that, that they understand that we're not doing it because we don't want to do it. We're just doing it just to make sure we're maintaining staffing. And so once you make sure you keep your department aware of what's going on, we've been able to really maintain the business service as needed. So we haven't really missed a beat. And as things continue to improve, we will continue to be even more proactive in what we do as an organization.
Yeah. John?
I agree. We sent, on any given day, now we have about 1,400 of our employees that are teleworking. Years ago, it was frowned upon. But really, it was early COVID and what we learned from the nursing homes. And so we had the biggest outbreak in the United States of COVID deaths in nursing homes in Henrico because we have so many nursing homes. And initially, we wanted to get in, and we were told, you can't go in. You know, medical advice was, if Eric doesn't have symptoms and I have COVID, you don't test Eric, and I have COVID. And the reality is we should have tested everyone. That's what we're doing now. So if anything, as an organization, we learned to break the rules, which led to things like the largest mass vaccination in our state at the Raceway, where we vaccinated people from everywhere. We didn't ask them if they were Henrico residents. Come in, we paid for it. And ultimately, I think that has made a difference. And just last week, we were able to procure tens of thousands of test kits for our schools that'll be available to staff to basically get through this last piece of the Omicron variant, hoping it's the last piece.
You know, my wife and I got our shots out there, and we were amazed at how it was organized. And, you know, the whole thing we kept thinking about were the people that were there that were organizing and making sure that everything was run properly. From the time you arrived till the time you left, it was really, really efficient and nicely done. So we appreciate everybody's leadership with that. I'm just curious, have you ever received a really good suggestion from an employee who you least expected to approach you?
So while you're thinking, you're going to see a bond package being presented here soon in our community. And one of the projects is a public safety training center. And I was at Firehouse 10 a couple years ago, and I had a firefighter come to me, and he said, you know what? All this development you all are doing, at the vertical development, if anything happens at Libby Mill or Greengate or Rockets Landing, we don't know how to fight those fires because we're taught a certain way. And that planted a seed. And ultimately, Eric has needs now that also evolve from this type of development. So you're going to see a package that is a training facility for police and fire. And it basically takes the initial training that our public safety folks have and amps it up, if you will, to cover the new type of development.
Right.
And that came from a firefighter at Firehouse 10.
That's neat. That's
Yep.
a terrific story. Eric, you want to add anything to that?
So I can't think of anything to that magnitude. I will say that I have had the opportunity, and still, it's still going on, to have conversations with my employees one-on-one.
Great.
And so I'm getting a lot of ideas
Yeah.
from people that I haven't really met.
Yeah.
So these are individuals I'm just getting to know that are bringing some ideas to the organization to try to make us better.
Right.
To just try to help improve the service that we were providing to our county residents.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say anything of that magnitude, but there are small projects that are continuing to go on
Right.
within our organization, and those ideas are coming from the men and women in
But, so this is why everyone loves our police chief, because he's so humble. I mean, so what he's not telling you is all the metrics that police report on, a number of internal processes, how many regulations have you changed just in a period of time. And so, and it comes from the conversations that he has had with all of the staff. So, I mean, he's being far too humble.
Yeah.
The Henrico County Police Department of right now
Right.
is much different as far as how they interact with the citizens, the expectations, and also, what was it you said one time to, it was the first couple of weeks, and we had, I forget what the issue was, and this is where I knew I absolutely was going to love the new chief. We had an issue where a police officer did not speak very well to someone in the community. And do you remember what you told that person? It may have been the command staff you were talking to, but do you remember?
It may have been, I just said, sometimes we get ourselves in trouble. We just got to know when to shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we have officers out here that speak very well to community members, and then we just take it that extra step. It's like, ugh. Sometimes it makes you cringe, like, you didn't really need to say that.
Right.
And so those conversations, as he mentioned, those conversations I'm having with our employees one-on-one, a lot of policy changes have taken place because
Right.
we've had those conversations. And I'm trying to learn. I'm still learning some of the things that we've been doing in the county.
Sure.
And I always tell people we can always be better. And so we're always looking to be better. And so those ideas have been coming in from members that I have not met. And like I said, I'm meeting with every one of my staff members one-on-one, and we're having some really, really good conversations.
But that just reiterates something that you both have said earlier and been consistent with throughout the evening is how important listening is, and the fact that you took the time. I mean, you could easily brush that employee off, that firefighter off, but you didn't. And you've taken the time to listen to every employee. I always loved it when I was in a school, and the quietest person in the school came up with the best idea that you'd had in years. I mean, that just made my day when you had some of those opportunities, some of those experiences like that. So it's good that you're doing that. If you come home and Mrs. English says, I'm not fixing dinner tonight, it's on you, or Mrs. Vitoka says, I'm not fixing dinner tonight, it's on you, what are you going to fix, you and Mrs. English, and what are you going to fix, you and Mrs. Vitokas? And you can't call out, you can't order out, it's on you.
I was getting ready to say, you said fix.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be any fixing. It's definitely probably going to be a call out.
Oh, come on.
I can't say it's going to be a fixing. If you wanted to bake something, I do a little baking. But I don't
Okay.
know about the cooking part.
Okay. I love your honesty. John, how about you?
So I'm exactly the opposite. I'm the one that is more likely to cook in our house. I love to cook. It's another way of relaxing. And I was actually at the Publix picking up some salmon that I'm going to cook as soon as I get home.
Good for you. When you look to the future, how does the county and the police department continue to offer quality services? I think that's been something that Henrico has been known for years and years and years. How do you keep that up? What's the key to being able to do that in both your areas?
I mean, I think for us, generally, we have to be able to meet the needs of every generation. And those are going to be different, and they evolve, right? So the younger generations are going to want to do everything remotely on a phone. The older generations are going to want services, that involve one-on-one.
All right.
But again, I'm not going to undersell some of the older generations, because I think with COVID, there's a lot of technology that, I'm thinking of my 84-year-old dad. I mean, the guy he sends me, he'll, what do you call it, FaceTime me. I'm like, my dad on FaceTime, you know what so I think we have to be able to accommodate all those generational differences, but also ethnic, racial, every type of difference, and basically make it so that we are a welcoming place.
Right.
And I think if we get that right, we can do anything.
Yeah. Eric?
I think it goes back to one of your earlier questions. You got to make sure you're bringing the right people into the industry, and that's going to help to ensure that the service that citizens are getting is sufficient. And then we also have to recognize any changes that take place within the county. There's a lot of great things that are coming our way in the county.
Right.
There's no question. This county is going to look totally different in a few years.
Right.
And that's a great thing. We have to recognize that there's going to be change in that, and how do we adapt to that to ensure that those residents and those people that are coming in and visiting our city are going to receive the same quality service that they should expect. And so we got to make sure we recognize that and then make the adjustments to ensure that that does occur.
Okay, I'm about to end your torture, okay? So let me ask you this. When you take a look at police departments and county government, and you take a look at your leadership, how can houses of worship help you? How can houses of worship help police officers? How can houses of worship help county managers? Any ideas on that?
For me, a lot of it has to do with messaging. As I talk about some of the things that's happening in the county, we have violent crime. And unfortunately, we had 25 people that lost their lives in 2021.
Right.
11 of those had a domestic nexus to them. And so when you talk about houses of worship, and I encourage our faith leaders to talk about those things in their congregations, because this, it's kind of like hitting. People don't want to talk about things that go on inside residence.
Right.
And I always tell people, we don't police inside people's homes. And so it's important for people to have somewhere where they feel safe to having that conversation. That way we can find ways to intervene and try to assist those individuals. And so between that and be able to get out in communities and provide some sense of consolation for some individuals that may be experiencing some things that are going on in their lives, I think those are ways that, houses of worship can really, really help us.
Right.
And I think beyond the personal stability that your church or synagogue or mosque may offer you, there's a community stability that comes from houses of worship. And so we actually, as an organization, 2 years ago, created a new position, a deputy county manager, Monica Callahan, who actually was involved with the bike race a number of years ago. She was instrumental in that effort. But this is where there's so many community needs, so many gaps. And think about what this one church can do. And I'm sure you have outreach, many outreach efforts. But the more that there could be that conversation, I think more opportunities. And so we have a group of faith-based leaders that we reach, and we have a monthly call. And, if you all want to be part of that, we'd
Right.
love to have,
Yep.
as many churches as possible. But, I mean, it's everything
Yeah.
from a community standpoint.
I'll compliment the police department and the county government. I've participated in a number of those faith-based meetings that you've held over the years. Now, they've cut back a little bit because of COVID, but I've learned a lot in those, and I think they're a real great opportunity to connect with churches. So we're going to take some questions now. We'll probably have some questions. If you're at home and you have a question for Chief English or County Manager Vitokis, please use your chat box feature, and I'll be looking for those from Aaron Miller, our modern worship leader, who's coordinating that. And those of you who are here in the sanctuary, if you have a question for Chief English or County Manager Vitokis, microphone's on behind you there. Don't hesitate to come up, and we'll take some questions before we close out this evening.
Mr. Manager, you referenced earlier some discussion about how the county has grown over the years. Could you touch on that magic formula that the county has used for years in balancing our corporate presence with our residential presence in order to keep the not only the tax level but the amount of involvement in a proper balance?
Absolutely. So what Linda is referring to is a 70-30, 70 residential, 30% commercial of the tax base. So getting to 30% commercial is considered ideal by many standards for local governments. We have hovered around that and have gotten to the point now where we are number 2 in the state in jobs. And that's a pretty significant statistic because we're either number 5 or 6 in population. But it was Mr. LaVecchia, Mr. Hazlett, I think, and those boards that served that were able to do that for many years. We are now, you're going to hear also in the next several weeks that the budget that is going to be introduced at a tax rate of 85 cents. That is down 2 cents from the current year. And there's also, for the first time ever, the county is going to be suggesting a rebate from the current surplus because we have managed our affairs very well, but also assessments are quite frankly going through the roof. So many, many years ago, you go back to 1979, the tax rate was $1.07. And so we'll be able to manage everything that we need to at that 85 cents. But yes, 70-30.
Chief English, this is a question from a viewer at home. Police are looking more like combat soldiers and combat soldiers that are trained to shoot first. How are police training changing to avoid the tragic shootings we have seen too frequently?
So a lot of that does go back to continuous training, looking at things, taking a step back, assessing situations. We've had several of those that have taken place in my time here in Henrico, where we've had to get on the scene and really assess it, seeing as whether it's worth us going in or whether we can take a step back. I will tell you that we get the question about militarization and how we look many, many times from citizens. There is an opportunity for us now to kind of look at, we're actually looking at our uniform. And you are probably going to see over the next several months us looking more, I would say from a citizen's perspective, you're going to say it looks more militarized because we're going to allow officers to wear an outer carrier vest rather than have it on the inside. But there's many reasons for that. One, it's more comfortable. One, it breathes better, and I will tell you one of the things, it takes a lot of weight off of your waist. I don't know if people have ever picked up a gun belt before with all the materials on that, but it's quite heavy. I worn it for over 30 years, and it's created some back issues for me. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to ensure that officers coming up don't have the same issues that some of us, I would say seasoned guys, I won't say old guys, but seasoned guys have had carrying that gun belt. And so I think a lot of that goes back to training. You have to train your people properly. You have to consistently do it. And you got to make sure people understand what your values are as an organization.
Right.
And if you can do those things, no organization is going to be perfect.
Right.
But you're hoping that individuals will have a better understanding and assess those situations to the best of their ability.
Yeah, and I think what your answer is a good one, because there's so many things involved there, and that communication piece, that listening piece, and the training piece, they all kind of merge together, and so tough circumstances to work through for sure. John, here's one for you. How has the philosophy of community development in Henrico County changed in the past decade or so? What have we learned?
So we've learned that mixed use is good. We were so singular, and it really was. It wasn't just Henrico. I think it was just nationwide. You look at a development like Libby Mill or Rockets Landing or Greengate, where you have multiple generations living together. You have single family, you have rental, you have high-end rental, and you have affordable rental. You have townhomes. I mean, Rockets Landing, which was an industrial brownfield. You remember that? And so that real estate is the most valuable per acre assessed value in the county at $1.5 million per acre. Absolutely incredible. And the folks that live there love it. West Broad Village is another example. And you have, anytime there's a home that goes up for sale, you have immediate turnover. And Chief, I'm guessing you're not getting a whole lot of calls for service, in developments like that. But they were a challenge initially because it wasn't the way we did things. So the fire department objected. Police had some questions. The planners didn't like it. And ultimately, it was community development. Randy Silber, actually, under his watch, who was one of the ones who helped us figure that out.
Right. Any questions from, yes?
I had a question for you, John. I moved to the county many years ago now for the quality of life aspect that I felt like the county would provide my family versus other parts of this community. And I just want to let you all know, you've never let me down for many decades now, so I want to thank you for your service and what you bring to the county. One of the big positives in the county from a business perspective has been economic development. And again, we've done great work in that area. I'm real interested in how you got Green City or Navy Hill from Green City, or many aspects of that project into the county. How did that go about?
How did we get Eric English into the county? I mean, let's be frank. And I don't mean to be flip about it, but the city over deliberated. I don't know what happened with Navy Hill, but ultimately we had some folks reach out to us and about an arena. And the response that they got was, if you can make a business case for it, great. But we're not looking to put tax dollars into an arena. And so ultimately what ended up happening was this group came back and they said, we want to talk to you about a thing called an eco-district. And I didn't know what an eco-district was, but ultimately it's basically an area where there is no net carbon impact on the environment. Well, this thing would be the largest one east of the Mississippi. And then, add to that the arena, and this was not the Navy Hill proposal, will be the greenest arena in the Americas. And so you start adding all of that to what Linda said about 70-30 in jobs and schools, and now we have some properties that we have bought in eastern Henrico where, you know, the environment is out front and center. We've got an environmental studies program going in Verona, a living building that's going to be built for the schools. And all of that, I think, is you can make a business case. I can make one to you. You can make one to your neighbor. It's the smart thing to do. But again, why did the city lose a guy like Eric English? That I can't answer. But I can tell you that he has a home in Henrico, has had a home in Henrico, and we're going to take care of him as long as he chooses to work for Henrico.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more question from the audience.
Chief, this is a question for Chief English. I have two members of my family who are in law enforcement, one who actually was a Henrico police officer for a number of years. But when they began their careers 10 years ago, it was extremely competitive, and there was lots of applicants for each job. And it was tough to become a Henrico officer or another officer in another jurisdiction. I was wondering how you go about today recruiting officers for your department in such a difficult employment environment.
Very, very good question. And I will say that it's not just in Henrico. As you talk about the applicant pool as it was many, many years ago, it's not the same pool that we're getting now. And so it is a struggle. And so one of the things we're looking at is ways in order to bring individuals in that we feel will be good in your organization. And so we look at, you know, military individuals. We look at individuals that are coming out of college that may have been involved in athletics. Only because, you know, it's a team concept. You know, even coming into policing, there's a team concept associated with that. And so you look at targeting those type of individuals coming to your organization. And so you try to build up the applicant pool, but also having an understanding that the people coming into policing 20 years ago are not the same people coming into policing today. And so you got to meet people a little bit where they are. And I would say that our training is much better now than it was 20 years ago. And so we can train those individuals, even though they may not be of the same fabric we were 20 years ago, they can still be productive and excellent police officers now. And so that, like I said, that applicant pool is not where it was 10 years ago, but we still struggle and we still try to put ourselves out there to go as many places as we can to try to recruit the right people to come into law enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank you. We thank the questions that came from the viewers at home, and we thank you for the questions here in the sanctuary. And just closing out, John and Eric, we want to thank you for your time this evening. It means a lot for you, for us to be here. We've learned a lot, and we appreciate it. And we thank you both for your leadership. You're doing so much in our community, and it means a lot to all of us, and we thank you for that. And we hope that you find the sleep and energy to keep it going. Mrs. English, we want to thank you for being here this evening, too. And John, we'll hope to get you home quick so you can cook that salmon for you and your wife. To our viewers at home, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Please come back on Tuesday, February 15th. That evening, our guest will be Marvin Harris. He's the Executive Director of the Woodland Restoration Foundation. Mr. Harris will be discussing the work taking place at the historic Woodland Cemetery. And that cemetery is the final resting place of tennis legend Arthur Ashe and thousands of other African Americans from the Richmond community. So we're looking forward to having Marvin Harris with us that evening. In closing, I want to thank the Trinity staff for helping us coordinate this event. Modern worship leader Aaron Miller handing all the technology up in the balcony, and our communications specialist Kim Johnson, who got a lot of good information out for us for this. And back in December, I was absent for the community conversation, and our senior pastor, Larry Leno, pinch hit for me, and I want to thank him for doing that. Thank you so much for being here. We love it when you're here with us, and we thank those who watch at home, and we really thank Eric and John for being here this evening. Thank you, and be safe.
Thank you.